Hi everybody, my name is Nicholas Phillips and this is my oral report on the Ecological Integration Symposium for my Fundamentals of Ecology class. I was only able to attend 3 of the 15-minute student presentations towards the end of the event due to working all day Thursday and traveling Friday morning. However, I did learn a decent amount of interesting things. The first talk that I attended was Understanding Wildlife Pet Keeping in Iran, Motivations and Views on Illegal Wildlife Trade by Purya Sardari, who is a graduate student. This study was conducted through a series of live interviews using Zoom with illegal pet owners in Iran and was specifically targeted at finding out which factors influence the wildlife trade in that area. They used reflexive thematic analysis to narrow it down to a few key factors such as status signaling, performative luxury, personal benefit, usually through emotional attachment, and practicality for their type of homestead. Another interesting link between essentially all of the individuals was the presence of cognitive dissonance, which is the people in the trade condemning the trade itself while excusing themselves, stating that they believed that they were saving these animals from the trade instead of actually feeding into it. Most of the individuals that they interviewed did have a preference for captive bred animals instead of wild caught, which is a positive sign. And they also stated that their distrust in local law enforcement specifically about the well-beings of these animals was a main factor in not turning in the traders to the authorities, because they didn't believe that the authorities would take any better care of them than the traders themselves were. This was a really interesting talk. It was really nice to see that so many of these people actually cared about these animals. The majority of them weren't in it for the performative aspect of it, for showing their friends, that they own a Bengal tiger or whatever. Most of them were just regular people who lived in apartments and thought, wow, that's a really pretty snake, and I'd really love to have it, in my apartment, and they don't allow cats and dogs, so I got a snake instead. And a lot of them were really, really attached to these animals. They weren't just things that they had for fun. They were their friends and their trusted companions, just like a cat or a dog would be for most people. The pets that I have aren't illegal pets. All of them have been bought at pet stores or from legal breeders. But as someone who owns tarantulas and vine garoons and geckos, it's something that I very much believe in is saving animals from these places that don't really treat them very well. And so I can definitely see myself in the shoes of some of these people who have taken in these animals believing that they're saving them, even though they could potentially be feeding into this trade that's not necessarily good for the environment in an ecological sense, taking things out of their natural habitats, introducing them to new habitats. It does have repercussions, but I can definitely see myself being one of these people in their same situations. The second talk that I went to was Combined Impacts of Road Development and Urban Expansion on Biodiversity and Habitats, Insights from Brazil, Indonesia, and Nigeria by Rakibul Ahassan, who is also a graduate student. This study used interactive models of transportation growth as well as urban land change to forecast future urban land expansion and its effects on biodiversity using information from Brazil, Indonesia, and Nigeria. So urban encroachment has begun to threaten these areas, as well as threatening the species located in these areas, with the highest level of casualties being the amphibians and the reptiles, and the least affected being mammals and birds, possibly due to their higher ability of movement. This shows a perceived threat to the goal of the world to protect 30% of Earth's landmass by 2030, which is especially important to these specific areas because they contain almost 60% of all reptile and amphibian biodiversity in the world. This talk was rather interesting. It was a lot of math and statistics and things that I was having trouble wrapping my head around. But in the back of my mind, it was almost kind of obvious with the expansion of roads and the expansion of urban sprawl, destroying habitats and taking away land from the animals that live there. Of course, there's going to be things that start to go endangered or go extinct because of this expansion. So it seemed like they were taking a very basic thing and almost making it too specific, and it was kind of hard to rationalize like exactly why they needed to do that, because it kind of just seemed like an obvious thing. I mean, they were trying to figure out the numbers and exactly how it would affect it, but I don't think in their research that they had like specific analysis for a lot of it. It was research that has been going on for years and will need to go on for years further. So it was just a large section of stuff that was kind of hard to put into a 15-minute talk. The last talk that I went to, my favorite of the bunch, was the impact of social isolation on Madagascar hissing cockroaches. So in this experiment, they kept 3 enclosures of 15 individual Madagascar hissing cockroaches together, while they kept 45 individuals separately in housings all by themselves under the same conditions for 8 weeks. And then they would put 1 individual from each section and they would put them in an arena together, which was just a Tupperware container that had like a blue marking in the middle of it as like a combined area. And then they would just put 2 individuals in there and see how they interacted. And their hypothesis was wondering if the isolated individuals would exhibit heightened behaviors of anxiety, as well as altered exploratory patterns based on similar studies of social mammals having the same results. And their results did actually indicate that there was a significant difference in anxiety-like behavior, which included exploration frequency, avoidance frequency, and the duration of their freezing, as well as a reduction in physical development and aggressive interactions during initial reintegration for those isolated individuals. Fascinatingly, these trends were very similar to the studies on mammal behavior that they used in their research, and kind of showed that social interactions play an essential role in shaping animal behavior and can produce lifelong behavioral changes if implemented early enough. This was awesome because I love insects and I love Madagascar hissing cockroaches, and we know that they're social insects because they actually hiss to communicate with each other. And a lot of people don't think of insects as animals. They think of them as something lesser than. And so it's kind of nice to see that if you treat them poorly, that they do have the ability to modify themselves from that, especially in a way of like inducing anxiety, to think of them as almost more of a higher level learning creature, to have that emotional response that we know all too well. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this, even though you're basically forced to. But I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.